Hey you guys, welcome back. This is part 3 of us relicing a particular Fender Stratocaster that is mine. If you have not seen part 1 or part 2 and are interested in seeing on how we refinished the neck and refinished the body with nitrocellulose lacquer and then began the aging process, then you can go ahead and click on those and follow them. But if you don't feel like doing that because you're stubborn like me and you have oppositional disorder, then by all means carry on. Today is we're going to be working on bringing the whole thing home, and we're going to have to start looking at small details. We're going to have to start looking at things that typically would be a big tell for a vintage guitar. So for instance, some of the things that relicing or people who relic can sometimes miss, other than the checking, sufficiently checking the guitar and doing it with temperature swings, so this way you have a much better replication of the process. Instead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focused on things like pickguard screws, hardware, the pickguard, for instance, itself. Now, luckily with the pickguard, we actually caught a break because the pickguard that we've actually got on there has a 65-degree bevel on its edge. Now, what a lot of reissues fail to recognize, and a lot of people who do relicing don't quite pick up on, is that during the mid-1960s, Fender actually stepped away from its almost upright bevel on the edge of the pickguard. So if you imagine this being the surface of which that it lies against the guitar, and this being the edge of the bevel, typically speaking, you have a bevel that is about there. This gives you a cross section when you are looking straight at the pickguard, in which the black line is fairly narrow. But when you start to look at the guitars from, say, about 1962, 63, up to about 66, 67, somebody at Fender must have been trying to go for the high road, because it almost looks as though some of those pickguards came with a much wider black line. They did, but it wasn't because the material had a varied thickness. It's because the actual break angle of the bevel on the side of the pickguard is much more gradual. You'll notice that the edge of the bevel, where it finally terminates and comes to its plateaued space up top, is extremely close to the perimeters, screws, and things like that. So that is a big tell on a lot of reissues and relics, that you don't have that thickened pickguard black line that is achieved by having a much more gradual bevel in the side of the pickguard. Pickguard screws, the pickguard, how the pickguard is aging. You've got to remember back then, plastic was highly unstable. By 1967 and 1968, plastic itself in an international market was only really around for about 20 years at that point. Everything that leapt forward in modern construction during the 1950s did it on the back of DuPont and plastic manufacturing facilities. So if you look, for instance, at a Telecaster from 1953, you'll see a Blackguard Telecaster that is actually Bakelite. It is a type of plastic that came along before plastic. You'll notice that the pickguards are so unstable on those that they literally will just start wavering and fall apart. Now, Fender was never that extreme as far as the cheapness of material, but they were an entry-level guitar manufacturer for the first couple of years. So you've got to keep in mind that what you're essentially trying to replicate is poor quality. So take it as far as you wish. So we're going to start working on that today. We're going to work on the pickup pole pieces because they have too much of an edge around the outside. And as you pick up the guitar, that is going to be the first thing that somebody's going to pick up on. They're going to look at those pickups, those gleaming, bright, metallic brushed pole pieces with absolutely no beveled edge on the side, and that's going to be a screaming red flag. So what we need to do is we need to knock those edges down. We need to figure out what we're going to do with the pickguard to try to bring it a little further back, because remember, we're trying to replicate a heavily smoked in environment in which this guitar was there, absorbing all of that nasty stuff that makes it look good. And we need to reassemble the guitar because I want to play it. And hopefully you want to hear it. I don't know, maybe you don't. So let's go ahead and get it back together, get it all bolted together and sorted, and let's see what we can come up with. Cool. So as you're taking everything apart, just be mindful of the coils on the pickups. You definitely don't want to damage those windings. I've had a couple of guitars come through where it looks like maybe a screwdriver slipped, and we had to replace windings or replace full pickups. You could always have a pickup rewound, but when it comes to reissues and parts casters and relics and things we're making at home, the truth of it is that that would cost more than a replacement pickup. So just kind of keep in mind that if you do have something slip and it knocks one of those bobbins and breaks that lead, that you might be looking at a fairly expensive repair. When you're scuffing them with the Scotch-Brite pad, your best bet is to cut this up into small squares so it's a bit more manageable, and just kind of sweep it or flick it across the top of the pole pieces. This way you'll get the exposed metal around the edge that'll flash off after about a week of playing. And in the center where the Sharpie is, essentially what you're doing is you're using the Sharpie as a placeholder. It's not really intended to stay there the whole time. You've roughed up the surface and you've created more of a surface area on that metallic surface, so it's going to oxidize a lot faster. But more than that, the dirt from your hands, not to be gross, is going to start getting in there, perspiration, all that sort of stuff, and it will slowly start to replace that Sharpie. As the Sharpie is worn away, it will start to be supplanted by just natural dirt and grime and all that sort of jazz. So once again, you're just kicking it up to a certain point where it looks interesting and it looks comfortable, and then you're just kind of leaving it there and then just allowing natural age to continue forward. Now this edge it's too edgy. It's too edgy. Got carried away there for a minute. Okay, this is obviously brand new. It's got a shine on it. There are no scratches. It does have the nitrate green style tint, but the texture is wrong. Theoretically, if any type of plastic product were 40 years old, you would not have that kind of outer sheen. Instead, you're going to have something more like this, which is, you'll see rounded edges around the outside edge. And on the top, you'll see that there's a fairly dull patina, that the sheen is knocked down to maybe a satiny gloss. It's not quite a satin, it's not quite a gloss, kind of sits in between. And we've got some dirt that's residing around the inside of the pole pieces, and we've got some pigmentation change on the top. Now if you look at the two of them straight next to each other, you can definitely see that one of them is a lot lighter in color. It's tough with these lights, but in the midday sun you can definitely see it. And one of them definitely looks a little bit more pronounced and a little more minty, and this one looks like it just got dragged out of the bottom of a cup of tea. So I'm going to show you how to do this real quick. We're going to go over that right now because that's what's happening. We're changing a lot of different parts in this guitar, and what's going to start happening is anything that's shiny or perfect is going to really start to stand out and look anomalous comparatively to the rest of the guitar, which should have that well-worn look. These are plastic. They're exposed to perspiration and to water and to heat cycles and to UV light. So we need to get this guy to look a little bit more sophisticated, mature. That's what we say, right? We say mature when we're our age. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started on that. Now, one quick note about this particular style of relicing that we're going to be using on these pickup covers, and also the type of relicing that we're going to be using on the pickguard itself. It's not a style of treatment that I use often. If you're active in the automotive community and you watch Vice Grip Garage, you've probably already seen Derek's shine juice that he throws on trucks and stuff like that. It's a mixture of linseed oil and a couple different things. And essentially what this does is it acts as a temporary sealant. It seals everything in. Now when they're doing it in the automotive community, they're doing it for the express purpose of locking in that patina, safeguarding the materials, but simultaneously maintaining that look of wear, that look of an exhausted piece of equipment. So when we do this, we're not actually going to be doing final finishing, and the reason is we don't want it to stay on there forever. This is a clever trick. We've pigmented this just slightly and given it a texture. It's dry to the touch and it's absolutely permanent. However, it's not paint. It's actually just min wax. So we're using golden oak. That's 210B as far as the skew. And what we are going to do is we're going to rough up the covers, especially in the high traffic areas, the extreme edges, with the Scotch-Brite pad and create incremental and small scratches that will allow the plastic not necessarily to be absorbent, but will allow enough infinitesimal scratches in which the stain itself, some dirt, and a bit of oil from the hands can start to adhere to the plastic. After checking this and testing this for a couple of days and kind of beating the heck out of it or watching television and doing this to see if it was going to create discoloration or fading, what I've realized is that I may have inadvertently stumbled into a good process, because now what we've got is we've got a surface here that essentially will only be worn a lighter color by cutting through the stain, by picking, or by handling. So you can treat the pickup covers, and just call it done. After that, simply playing, the pick will contact the pickup cover in certain areas, and after playing for about 6 months or a year, you're going to start to see systemic lightening around the areas where you pick constantly. So, on the pickguard, if you have a tendency of playing up by the bridge, you'll start to see this area of the pickguard lighten up, and this area of the pickguard lighten up. If you're a bridge player like I am, because you just can't get away from that Nashville stuff, then you'll start to see the lightning right here. But it'll be consistent with your playing. So anybody watching you play this guitar is not only going to say, gee, that's a cool guitar, but they're going to say, ah, look at that, they've had that there for years. They're literally wearing holes in the pickguard. Before, when I was talking about the edge of the pickguard being addressed, now this is a pickguard that I actually bought that already had the bevel cut into it, but I've done this a couple different times, and there's a trick I'm going to show you guys to turn a standard beveled edge right here, in which you can see the more contemporary fashion super narrow black line. This is pretty much what you see on most reissues and on quite a few relics. Even the Nash relics have a tendency of coming with this narrow line, which is something that I feel personally should be addressed on most reissues. If you're paying that kind of money, why not just get that extra mile out where you have the nitrate style wide beveled edge? Okay, so if we were looking at the cross section of the pickguard, here is our upright bevel with a minimal exposed black line, and there's a screw up on top. You want to be aware of those because you can't cut in too far. If you start to hit the screw, you're going to start weakening that flange right there. So there's your cross section on your standard stuff. There's you. Doesn't look right. Okay, so what you're actually going to go ahead and do is take your Dremel, start chipping away right there, kind of doing sweeps. Don't stand still, don't get stuck. Make sure you keep it moving and start off with a very light barrel. You're going to shave away that top section. When you start to hit the white, when you start to actually see the white underneath the black become altered, you stop there. Once you get that section wide, you've knocked off that edge, clean it up, and you're a happy boy. actually wraps up part 3 of our Project Relic slash modification set of videos. And this is the worst intro I've ever done, so I'm going to do it over again. It's fucking light in my eyes. Of course, you pointed a light at your head. So that actually wraps up part 3 of our project, help! I'm going to get my head around it. I got to get my head around it. So I hope you guys really enjoyed part 1 and part 2. I hope you enjoyed part 3. You got this far, so it couldn't have been that tragic. Please make sure that you like and subscribe if you like this sort of subject matter from this channel, which is me, so that I know. And put a bunch of stuff down in the comments if you want to talk about alternate methods and ways to get a quicker and a higher quality result, maybe using different materials. That's the thing. There's one step in this whole process that I've neglected to mention, which is play it everywhere. Play it on street corners, play it in the rain, play it at shows, sweat into it, throw it around, be obnoxious with it. I've been banned from venues for doing that. You know, these instruments are an anachronism. If you look at a violin or a clarinet or a double bass or a drum set even, all of these things theoretically carry with it the belief that the more perfect it is, the better an instrument that it can be. And guitars kind of have a tendency of being left in the custody of careless and reckless young men and ladies. Thank God for small favors. Those guitars just get kicked around and knocked over. They fall over. They get broken. They get fixed. They get broken again. That's really the best way. And aside, obviously, as I was mentioning before, these things are works in progress. They're just constantly being updated and being modified, and we're selling them and we're buying them, and other people are doing things to them, and they're just kind of, you know, leaves on the river. You know, they're just floating around and picking up character, picking up damage, however you see it, just from being out there and being used. So when it really comes down to it, the final step of this whole process is to just pick it up and play the hell out of it. Kind of felt like maybe it was going to be a nice piece, but maybe not something that was fantastic. And I still have yet to really make up my mind. But in looking at it, yeah, it looks exactly like I wanted it to look. The neck came out great. The checking along the, what would be the scarf joint if it wasn't one piece, up around the headstock, you know, right where the volute is on an SG. That area with the checking came out fantastic, and the area by the heel came out very, very good too. There was a little bit of clouding on the headstock where you can see where it says Stratocaster that it's not as black as I would like it to be, but that's okay because, you know, we can work with that. And the green I didn't reveal as much as I had intended to reveal, and the reason is because I got to a certain point where I was very satisfied with how it looked, so I just left well enough alone. And there's another plane. The airplanes never stop, man, and I'm gonna invest in microphones, I promise, soon. What was I saying? I was saying something. I forget what I was saying. What were you saying? I don't know. It's your guitar, so just go ahead and play the hell out of it, wear the frets out of it, you know, and go play some rock and roll music.